So, a quadratic expression of the form x squared plus bx, you can add a term to form a perfect square trinomial. This is called completing the square. Now, to complete the square of x squared plus bx, we're going to add half of b squared. So for example, if we have the quadratic expression x squared plus bx, x squared plus bx, notice, remember, a quadratic expression is written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, right? So in this case, a equals 1, b equals 6. So we want to write this, or we want to complete the square of this expression. So to complete the squared, x squared plus bx, we have to add half of b squared. So in this case, we have x squared plus 6x plus half of 6 squared. How much is that? Okay, let's simplify this. X squared plus 6x plus half of 6, 3, square that, x squared plus 6x plus 9. Now, we have completed the square, we have completed the square, and now we have a perfect square trinomial. What will this perfect square trinomial be? It will be x plus 3 squared. Okay, so this method is called completing the square. Okay, so we complete the square. To complete the square of x squared plus bx, we have to add half of b. Okay, so if we look at example 2, it says complete the square for each expression. Write the resulting expression as a binomial squared. So we have to complete the expression. Let's find this value. Okay, so we have x squared minus 2x plus 6. We have the form ax squared plus bx. We have to find the value of c. So remember, to complete the square, we have to find half of b squared. So in this case, b, okay, I'll write it over here, a equals 1, b equals negative 2. So let's simplify that. So let's find half of b. That would be half of negative 2 squared. Half of negative 2, negative 1 squared. Negative 1 squared, 1. Okay, so x squared plus bx, x squared minus 2x plus 1. Plus 1. And there we completed the square. Now, after we finish doing that, we have to write the expression as a binomial squared. Note this, how simple it is. X, okay, the term we're looking for will be half of b. Half of b. So half of negative 2 equals negative 1, so that means minus 1 squared. And that will be our binomial squared. Now, if we look at part B, a equals 1, b equals 5. So let's complete the square. Let's find half of b squared, which is going to be equal negative 5 half squared. Okay? So how much is that? 5 halves squared. This is equal to 25 over 4. 25 over 4. So our perfect square trinomial will be x squared plus 5x plus 25 over 4. Okay, we are going to leave it like this, because if we divide, this will be in, it won't be a whole number, it will be a decimal, right? So we're going to leave it as a fraction. Now let's write this as a binomial squared. Simple. X, what was half of b? It was 5/2, so plus 5/2 squared, and that would be our binomial squared. So when we want to write our perfect square trinomial as a binomial squared, okay, always it will be in the form x squared, right? And it would always be, the number in here will always be half of b. Half of b. So in this case, -1. And in the second example, half of b was 5/2. Since here it was -1, -1. And here it was positive 5/2 plus 5/2. Okay? Now, we can complete the square to solve quadratic equations. Solving quadratic equations, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 by completing the square. Okay, these are the steps to follow. 1, collect variables on one side of the equation and constants on the other side. 2, as needed, divide both sides by a to make the coefficient of the term x squared term equals 1. Complete the square by adding b/2 squared to both sides of the equation. Factor the variable expression as a perfect square. Take the square root on both sides of the equation. Solve for the values of the variables. Okay? So, example 3 says, solve each equation by completing the square. Now, if we follow the steps that we previously read, we have to leave constants on one side and variables on the other side. So let's pass -6x to the other side of the equal sign. So now we will have x squared plus 6x equals 27. Okay? Now, let's complete the square on this side. Okay, let's complete the square. So that means, let's find half of b squared. In this case, b is equal to 6. So let's find half of 6 squared. Half of 6, 3 squared. 3 squared equals 9. Okay, so what we're going to do with this 9, we're going to add 9 on both sides of the equation. So we have x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 27 plus 9. Okay, now this is a perfect square trinomial, so we're going to write it as a binomial squared. Remember, x, half of b was equal to 3, positive 3 plus 3 squared equals 27 plus 9, 36. Now we're going to solve this equation by using the square root property. Square root on both sides. We simplified. X plus 3 equals positive negative square root of 36. Square root of 36 has a perfect square. That means x plus 3 equals positive negative 6. Okay? Now we solve. Pass plus 3 to the other side. And you get x equals negative 3 plus minus 6. So since this can be simplified, this means x equals negative 3 plus 6 and x equals negative 3 minus 6. Okay, so let's simplify. Negative 3 plus 6, x equals 3, and x equals negative 3 minus 6, negative 9. So this will be that solution for our equation. Okay, now if we look at example B, we have 2x squared plus 8x equals 12. Notice in example 1, the value of a was equal to 1. In this case, it is equal to 2. So we're going to have to make this 2 1. Okay, how do we make this 2 1? By dividing both sides of the equation by a. In this case, dividing by 2. So let's simplify. 2 divided by 2, that's 1. That's 1x squared. Plus 8 divided by 2, 4x, equals 12 divided by 2, that's 6. Okay? Now we have variables on one side, constants on the other side. So let's complete the squared. Notice in this case, b equals 4. Right? So let's find half of b squared. That means half of 4 squared. Half of 4, that's 2 squared. 2 squared equals 4. Okay? So now we're going to add 4 on both sides of the equation. So we get, this will be x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 6 plus 4. Okay? This is a perfect square trinomial. So this is going to be x, half of 4, 2, plus 2 squared equals 6 plus 4, that's 10. Square root property. We simplified. X plus 2 equals square root of 10. Positive negative square root of 10, sorry. Now 10 is not a perfect square, so we're going to leave it like that. We pass 2 to the other side, and we get that x equals negative 2 plus minus square root of 10. Okay, so this will be the exact solutions for our quadratic equation. We can use, if you want, you can use calculators, but your answer will be estimated. So we're going to try and leave the answers like in this form, because this is the exact solutions. And don't forget that this also means x equals negative 2 plus square root of 10, and x equals negative 2 minus square root of 10. Okay? So we have two solutions. We are always going to have two solutions. So there you go. Example 3. We solve the quadratic equations by completing the squared. So this is another way of solving quadratic equations. In the previous lesson, we solved the quadratic equations by graphing and factoring. Today's lesson, we learn how to solve them by using the square root property and by completing the squared. Now let's look at the next example. Now, example 4, write each function in vertex form and identify its vertex. Okay, so we're going to write both equations, both functions, in vertex form. What was the vertex form of a quadratic function? F of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k, where the vertex is equal to hk. Okay, from previous lessons. So we want to write it in this form and then identify the vertex. So part A, it says f of x equals x squared plus 10x minus 13. So how are we going to write this in a vertex form? Step 1, we are going to group the variables. So we get x squared plus 10x minus 13. Okay, now we're going to complete this squared. We're going to complete this squared. So we're going to have, in this case, b equals 10. So to complete the squared, we're going to have to find half of b squared, 10 half squared, half of 10, that's 5 squared, 5 squared, 25. Okay, so what are we going to do? We write f of x equals, we complete that squared, x squared plus 10x plus 25 minus 13. Now, we are trying to keep this equation balanced. Notice that we are adding and subtracting to the right side of this equal sign. So in order to keep it balanced, if we add 25 inside, we're going to have to subtract 25 outside. Okay, because 25 minus 25, that's 0. The equation is still balanced. Okay, so we're going to write it like that. If we add 25 inside the parentheses, we subtract outside 25. Now this is a perfect square trinomial, so that means f of x equals x half of b, that was 5, plus 5 squared, negative 13 minus 25, that's negative 38. And there we have it. We have our equation in vertex form. Okay, a equals 1. Yes, h is equal to negative 5. Why negative 5? Because remember, the vertex form is a times x minus h, and here we have plus h. So that means that we have f of x equals x minus negative 5 squared minus 38. So the vertex is equal to hk, equals hk. So h is negative 5, k is negative 38. And that will be the vertex for our function in vertex form. Now the same happens in part B. We have g of x equals 2x squared minus 8x plus 3. So first thing is to group our variables. Okay? Now, notice that our term for a is 2. So we're going to have to factorize this. So we're going to put this 2 outside. G of x equals 2 times. 2 times what equals 2x squared? 2 times x squared. And 2 times what equals negative 8x? Negative 4x plus 3. Okay, we factorize. So that's what we get. 2 times x squared minus 4x plus 3. Now let's complete this squared. So we get g of x equals 2 times, sorry, we didn't complete the square. Let's complete the square. So in this case, b equals negative 4, right? So let's find half of b squared. That will be equal to negative 4. Half of negative 4 squared. Half of negative 4, that's negative 2 squared. And negative 2 squared equals positive 4. So now we have g of x equals 2 times x squared minus 4x. G of x equals 2 times x squared minus 4x plus 4 plus 3, okay, plus 3 Now, since we're adding 4 inside the parentheses, don't forget to keep the equation balanced. So we're going to subtract 4, but notice, since we're multiplying by 2 here, we have to multiply this 4 by 2. That way our equation will be balanced. So now we get g of x equals 2 times x squared minus 4x plus 4 plus 3 minus 8. Okay, now we write it as a binomial squared. G of x equals 2 times x, half of b was equal to negative 2, minus 2 squared, positive 3 minus 8, that's negative 5. And here we have our function in vertex form. Then our vertex is equal to hk. Okay, don't forget the vertex form of a quadratic function is f of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k. A squared, a times x minus h squared minus k. So x equals 2 and k equals negative 5. That will be the vertex. Okay, so that's all what we have to do in this lesson. So your homework, this will be homework number 3, page 245, problems 2 through 36 even. Okay, again, homework number 3, page 245, problems 2 through 36 even. Okay guys, see you.